Lobovsky. I'm the co-founder of Formlabs, and
I'm Matt Stultz, 3D printing and digital fabrication lead for Make Magazine.
so I think we're going to have a little chat about the future of 3D printing. But first, I wanted to show you a little bit about what Formlabs has been up to, which is, I think, sets a little bit of the context here. So on Tuesday this week, we launched the Form 2, which is our second generation from the ground up redesigned desktop 3D printer. And
It's awesome. We can't say that.
For background, what we do is we build desktop 3D printers for professional designers and engineers that care about quality and high resolution. So I think before we talk about the future, we have to talk about the past a little bit. So hopefully everybody knows by now that 3D printing wasn't invented like 5 years ago when it started to get popular. It's actually about 30 years old. And so there was this sort of first phase of 3D printing that was about these large, industrial, expensive machines. They had amazing capabilities, could print really impressive things, even back in the early days. And that's because in the beginning, the people who invented 3D printers were focusing on pushing the capabilities first before they focused on making it accessible. So there were people like Carl Deckard and Chuck Hull and Scott Crump who actually invented all of the core processes that every 3D printer you see today uses. And they also pioneered a lot of the use cases for 3D printing, but the real potential couldn't be realized because most creators did not have access to them. So then around 2005, people got started building open source desktop 3D printers. There's the RepRap project, there's the Fab at Home project at Cornell, which I worked on. And that was a really important moment for 3D printing, because that was the point where people realized that these things don't have to be as big as a fridge, and they might one day be on everybody's desktop. And it was also really important because it was the point that a whole new generation of people got inspired to work on 3D printing and think about what comes next, including us at Formlabs. But the problem was, most of these machines, the value was in using them, or designing them, or building them, and people weren't really getting value out of what was produced from them, which is ultimately what 3D printing is about. So we think there needs to be a new phase of 3D printing. And in that new phase, what we at Formlabs believe is going to be important is taking the capabilities and the power of these first generation industrial machines and marrying that with the accessibility and footprint and affordability of the desktop machines. And if you can finally bring that capability to a huge range of makers and anybody working with 3D design, then some interesting things can happen. So that's what we've been working on for about 2 years. And this is a little video.
With beautiful details. With a larger build volume and smarter technology, the Form 2 is designed for performance. Now you can create perfect prototypes right on your desktop. We've redesigned the way we print. A new peel mechanism, a wiper, and a heated resin tank work together so you can print parts not possible on other machines. An integrated resin system adds materials automatically. With wireless connectivity, sending prints to your machine is simple. The Form 2 is built for collaboration. You can monitor progress, receive notifications, or easily share your printer with your team. Engineered for precision, designed for reliability. The Form 2, the most advanced desktop 3D printer ever created.
Thank you. So that's Form 2. We think this is going to be a big step in getting to this new phase of 3D printing, but we think a lot of people are going to be working on this. So this is, I guess, my sort of initial prompt here about where I think 3D printing is going.
I absolutely agree with a lot of things that you said, Max, about the future and where things are going. I mean, the idea of it initially, especially as we moved in with the RepRap project and early desktop 3D printing, there was a lot to do with building your printers, and I really hope that does still continue. I want people to continue pushing and innovating at home with 3D printing, but we need to move 3D printing away from 3D printing for 3D printing's sake and 3D printing for changing the way we live our lives. Because we don't have that killer app right now. We talk about the desktop PC revolution and things like that. People started making desktop home computers, but until we had things that they gave us spreadsheets and things like that, we really didn't have the killer app that made home computing, desktop computing really catch on. We don't have that for 3D printing yet. Right now, again, the point of 3D printing, look at the thing I made, isn't it cool because it's 3D printed? Like, that's never going to entirely make it catch on. So until people are working on really usable programs or processes, I think we're still going to be in this hobbyist stage. But the tools are there. I think it's more about people thinking about the application process.
I think you're right that the finding use cases and people learning how to use these machines is a huge part of what's missing. But I guess we're still stuck on one. I think we're still stuck on one step before, which is you can't even get to spend energy on that if you don't have a printer in the first place, and number two, if it isn't easy enough to use, that you can spend more of your time on the other parts of the process.
Yeah, absolutely. The ubiquity of printers out there is important. We have great services like 3D Hubs that allow people who don't have printers to go out and start working with the technology and using the technology. And it's really been incredible over the past few years how many public libraries have 3D printers that are now accessible, which I think is really great. I think it's nice to see libraries, realizing that this is something that they can catch up on, and that comes. But I think it's chicken or egg, right? Like until people have a reason to justify buying a printer, and thankfully we've got machines coming down to $399 or somewhere in there for machines that they're good. You can make usable parts. There's decent parts. But it's hard for someone. No offense, I'm not going after you, but it's hard for someone to justify a $3,000-some machine when they don't have the thing that they need to make.
Sure. Yeah. So one question I have for you as sort of representative of the make community is that are we losing some of sort of the essence of where these desktop machines came from? And we launched our Form 1 at Maker Faire 3 years ago, almost to the day. And I worked on the Fab Lab program, which is sort of community of maker spaces before that. And that's a lot of where the sort of inspiration for this came from. And although we believe this is kind of the next step, in some ways I also see that we may be losing some of the by making the
spirit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have to watch what I say here to not make people mad, which I'm very bad at. Crowdfunding and Formlabs, they launched their initial Form 1 on crowdfunding platforms. I'm a huge RepRap guy. I love RepRap. RepRap project to me is still like that's where 3D printing should be at. We should be sharing knowledge. We should be sharing ideas and how things work. We should be sharing design so we can improve the way everything works. unfortunately, in my opinion, and this is my opinion, this is me throwing the make badge away and everything else, crowdfunding makes that difficult because we see companies like PrinterBot, like Formlabs, many others that are out there that they made a lot of money on Kickstarter, and it's kind of, people say, hey, I can make a 3D printer, maybe I can get a piece of that pie. And unfortunately, we start to find projects that don't go open source, that don't share the work that they're doing, and really frustrating to me when you just see, hey, that is, that's 99% of a RepRap device. You changed one cool thing, that's a cool change, but you're not going to share that change, and you built everything else on RepRap. Makes me angry.
Yeah, I mean, so we're not primarily an open source company, and that was something we thought a lot about.
But you also released one of the first commercially available SLAs, so you weren't necessarily building on everything else. It's really the FFF, FDM machines that become frustrating.
Yeah, I think I believe open source software is an amazing model that works really well. More things should be built that way, and in general, I mean, open source makes sense because it reduces redundant work, basically. And I'm eager to see that succeed for hardware, but it seems like a lot of people are throwing themselves at that and haven't yet found a way to marry both the open source and commercial success. And it's tough.
I think, yeah, it absolutely is tough. I absolutely agree, and part of it, I think is kind of sticking with it and finding things. I think 3D printing is actually a space where we can really look at the open source models and where it goes good and where it's gone bad. I'm sure a lot of you have seen Print the Legend. Starting minutes. I'm an ex-MakerBotter. I worked for MakerBot for a very short period of time. MakerBot started out as an open source company and then went closed source, and what they saw was the community backlash of that. And there were other companies out there that were definitely teetering on that line. Were they going to go fully open source? Were they going to be closed source? Things like that. And actually, I think a lot of people saw the backlash against MakerBot and became more open source and started doing things because all of a sudden they saw the community rally around them for that. And so we've seen really successful businesses come out of this, but it's something that you can't be gun shy about. I think if someone starts a Kickstarter up basically of a copy of your project, you need to let the community deal with that instead of freak out and go fleeing away from open source. But yeah, the community's really where it's at, where it's pushing it. And back on this whole where are things going? On that same aspect of RepRap's great, but we need to get some of these RepRappers, in my opinion, thinking about not just how to make better printers, but again how to do other things with printers. Not plugging my other event, but it's one of the reasons why I'm running an event that's about doing things with 3D printers, not about 3D printers here. So we have the Mobo Paddle Battle, which is to design 3D printed paddle boats and race paddle boats. We're not showing off the printers themselves, we're showing off the creations that people are doing with the printers.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the right way to go. Should we take some questions, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you run into a lot of, since this application stuff's been around since the 80s, do you run into a lot of patent problems and stuff?
You asked exactly the right man.
3D printing, I wish there was a study about this, but I think if you plotted different industries on number of patents versus size of the industry, like in dollars, 3D printing is off the charts. It's actually not that big of an industry, and a lot of people have spent a lot of time patenting up everything they possibly can, which is a huge challenge coming in sort of as this second wave or third wave of companies and working off of established processes. So yeah, for those of you who don't know, we were sued by 3D Systems for patent infringement actually almost 3 years ago as well. It was about a month after Maker Faire, before we had shipped any product.
as soon as the Kickstarter was obviously successful.
Basically, a couple weeks after the Kickstarter. And that was a huge challenge for a small company. It was hard enough just to figure out how to design and ship this thing and support it, and we had to deal with that at the same time. And thankfully, we got some smart lawyers and smart investors on our side who helped us get through that. We've settled that since then. And ultimately, patents have a lifetime, and they expire, and the lifetime is roughly 20 years, depending on how it works. And so that's part of why you're seeing an explosion right now, is all these processes were invented roughly from like 85 to 90, so the key sets of patents are coming out now.
Yeah, I mean, we saw the explosion of FDM machines because the FDM patents expired, and it's kind of the easiest system to get rolling for 3D printing now. You know, the SLA patents are expiring, and you know, we've got SLAs coming. I think it was last February, one of the major SLS patents expired, and now you said 8 announced at Euromals, something like that. There's probably in the order of 10 SLSs that are on the way. So, you know, we're going to continue seeing more and more technologies come into play.
And to be clear, I think the patent system makes sense in general, or the general idea of patents makes sense as a way of encouraging R&D. There are specific problems with the way it's implemented now that can make it very difficult for new companies to get in. Basically, it's very difficult for companies to do deals to share or sell IP, so they usually just do the easy thing and just have the lawyers go at it. And that's not ultimately what was supposed to happen.
So it would be amazing though if like the patent system had some kind of, you're a big company, so you have to pay a lot of money for a patent. You're a little individual and you pay just a little bit of money for a patent, because the problem is the way the patent system works right now is, you know, if you're some major giant company in IBM, well, I'm not going to pick on them specifically, but we'll say IBM, they own all kinds of patents. You know, the patent system works really good for them, but if I go out and do something and IBM wants to use it, well, I have to defend my patent to make it valid. And IBM can throw lawyers at me until I'm broke and then do whatever they want.
Yeah, so there's some good proposed legislation that would fix a lot of these issues, but it's been stuck for a long time in Congress. So call your local congressman.
Is that the 5 minutes, or is that a question?
So what are your leading candidates for the killer app?
I keep joking that we need to do custom hood ornaments. You know, the icon that can have you on the front of the hoods. I mean, the prosthetic stuff has really been picking up. If you look at what Enable is doing, you know, that's not out there for everyone, but I think it's really showing some of the stuff that can be really done with 3D printing. But maybe what we need to start doing also is not just thinking about the prosthetic side, but customization and things for everyone's daily life. There's a really great project out here right now that I really enjoy. There's 3D printed handles for kitchen knives, and they'll actually scan your hand and then make a custom handle that will fit your hand. Oh. You know, this show you can't do this over traditional manufacturing. So this is showing some of the power that 3D printing has, and I would love to see more of that catch on.
I think the places that will first start seeing 3D printing sort of in everyone's lives, like much beyond this community, where everyone can say, this is how 3D printing helped me, is going to be more on the sort of dental, health, personal products sort of front. So there's already, this is like one of the unsung great stories of 3D printing is Invisalign braces. Those have been for years now. Every single one is made off of a 3D printed form. They have a factory that produces 50,000 3D printed parts a day. And that's one case where it happened to fit really well with what 3D printing can do, and it took a lot of R&D to get going. But there's a lot more applications in dentistry. There's applications in various surgical procedures where you print a custom guide that fits to the body for that procedure. There's a few companies working on earbuds that are basically fit to your ear. So I think this is where people will start to see 3D printing entering everyone's lives. But I'm not sure that the question really should be, what is the killer app? Because nobody asks what the killer app is for injection molding or sheet metal or other types of fabrication processes. And that's ultimately what 3D printing is. It's a new, interesting kind of fabrication process that has very different constraints from others, but it is a general way of making things. And just like other fabrication processes, we'll make whatever makes sense with it, and there'll be a wide range.
But most people don't have injection molding machines or sheet metal covers in their homes.
And I'm not totally convinced most people will have a 3D printer in their home anytime soon either.
Some people could argue that at-home 3D printing kind of underwent a bit of a bubble. What are your thoughts about, like, I guess the size of at-home 3D printing in the past, future, and now sort of thing?
Sounds like we're in varying opinions.
I think certainly there was a bubble in terms of the media hype and everything like that, and there was even for some companies which do release sort of public figures a bubble in terms of sales. But I think overall, desktop 3D printers are growing. What definitely has become clear, at least all of the major desktop 3D printer companies, is that there's no at-home 3D printer market at the moment, and nobody's actually actively working on that. There's a hobbyist market, a make market, but not a general mass consumer 3D printer. And so all the larger companies are focusing either on professional designers and engineers like Formlabs, or education, or hobbyists, or sort of specific segments like that. And I think that will continue for at least a few years. I hope that a mass consumer at-home 3D printer makes sense one day, and I would love to build it when it's possible, but it's not today.
Lowe's, Walmart, Staples, Home Depot, Barnes & Noble. These are all major retailers in the U.S. that are all going to be carrying 3D printers nationwide, either are currently or will be. Do you have another one, or are you just raising your hand?
No, I'm raising my hand.
Okay, all right, for that. I think if these guys, you know, as I said, I mentioned this in my talk yesterday, I think these guys have limited amounts of, you know, shelf space, right? And if they're taking up shelf space or putting 3D printers on them now, you know, granted this is going beside, you know, the skill saw and the tools kind of things, but they're expecting that there's enough of a market out there to buy these things that they should put them on their shelves everywhere. You know, these are big companies that pay attention to trends, and I think that they're thinking that this is going to continue on for a while. So we'll see how it goes.
From my own experience, my biggest barrier to 3D printing was the software itself. Are you guys seeing any sort of Formlabs, for example? Are you guys working on making that easier? Do you see anything happening in that space in general?
Do you mean the software to actually design 3D content? Okay.
The design that you're going to print.
Yeah. So what we do, like other 3D printing companies, we focus on the printer driver software, where you start with the model that you already have. But I totally agree that content generation may even be a bigger problem. I mean, that once you get sort of, I think, into this next phase and you get to the problems Matt is talking about, or what's the killer app, what's everybody going to be doing about it, it's going to be a lot more about the design software.
CAD is universally where everyone gets hung up. You need to right now. You need to take the time to pick a tool, invest in the tool, decide what it is that you want to do, whether that's you know, pretty dragons or, you know, engineering work, and find a tool that fits that, and just spend the time and learn it. Because once you know it, it opens up huge amounts of barriers to you. But it is frustrating right now. But you know what? You learn plenty of things that were frustrating in your life to be able to do them too. So just invest the time.
I don't think the answer is going to be everybody learns CAD or CAD gets easier to use any more than everybody has learned a programming language. Like that hasn't happened. That was one of the sort of views in the early days of the PC industry, that everybody's going to know how to program as computers get more popular, but it didn't happen. But there are light programming tools that everyone does know, like, for example, spreadsheets. And so I think that's the direction that the design tools will go in, not general purpose CAD, but some of these things you're starting to see where there's sort of online configurators where there's some sliders and you can adjust a model in the way you like that matters to you, but not necessarily design it from scratch.
Would you guys be able to take some more questions out back?
Sure.
So I want to thank you for a really fascinating presentation.
Thank you.